running a little staticky. Where'd Josh go? I like that closing chord. That was right there. A good closing chord, you musicians, you know, that is like so good. We are going to be in Daniel chapter 6. I know. I'll give you some time to find it. It's kind of hidden away, tucked away in the prophets in the back of the OT. Daniel chapter 6. Have any of y'all ever been to Japan? No? Okay. So I got to go many years ago, probably 2004. Some of y'all weren't alive. It's okay. It's 2000. Sorry. I didn't mean to offend y'all. But there is a train station that has a statue of a dog. And this little dog, you may have seen the movie, Hachiko. Some of y'all are like, yay. So there was a professor, a Japanese professor. Apparently doesn't like, the Bible might be too much for it today. There's a professor, and he really wanted this dog. And so he bought this dog, and it was for a lot of money for that time, in that day. And he brought this little puppy. This puppy took a 20-hour train ride. I didn't even know that, like, there's 20 hours of train ride in Japan. But you can apparently be on the train for 20 hours. And it was such a long journey that when, for this little puppy, that when they got him, picked him up at the train station, he was in really poor health, and they weren't even sure if this little dog would make it. But they nursed this little dog to health, and they became best friends. And so every day the professor would go to work, and his dog would follow him to the train station, and at the end of the day, the dog would be waiting there for him. But one day, he was waiting on May 21st of 1925, only 2 years after this little dog had been with his owner. And Professor didn't come back. He had suffered an aneurysm and passed away. But every day after that, the dog came at the end of the day and waited for his owner to come back. And people would be very mean to this dog because they just thought it was just this stray dog. So train workers would be mean, passerbyers, kids would be mean to this dog until they did the story on this dog that for 9 years, like, he was faithful every single day to go to the train station and wait for his owner to come. And so they did this newspaper article on him, and then this dog became like the hero. He was such a symbol of faithfulness to show up day after day waiting for the one that he loved to show up, for his friend and his master. And so they built a statue at this train station, and this has become a popular station, a popular place. Cue dog barking. Wow, that's good. Like when you can coordinate in your sermon, like an actual dog barking in the background. And so they have this statue there, and it's become a meeting place. It's become a place where people say, come here, and this is where you can find me. And we did ministry at that train station by that statue that is there to this day. So you can watch the story later. Sorry, I spoiled it. But I want to talk about faithfulness. How are we at faithfulness? How are we at showing up day after day? And I want to look at the story of Daniel in Daniel chapter 6. So I'm going to read just a few verses at a time. So Daniel chapter 6, I'm going to start in verse 3. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administration and the satraps that his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said, "O King Darius, live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, and advisors and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. So here, they're in Babylonian captivity. This is many years after the captivity has happened. And Ezra has gone back to Jerusalem. Nehemiah has prayed and asked the king, Cyrus, for funding to build back Jerusalem. But here's the thing, and maybe some of you know this experience. They had been in Babylon for like 50 years before they're able to come back. So a whole generation has been born in this place. And maybe for some of you, your parents came here, and if they gave you the opportunity, you were born here, you lived your life here, this is home for you. But maybe your parents are like, but our home really is another country, and they would love to go back and see family, to be there, but you're like, I don't even know that place. I would not want to return there and live there because this is home. Well, the same thing happened in Babylon. That as people went back to Jerusalem, we think of like, yeah, they get to go back to this place that they were taken from. But there was a whole generation that was like, but like, there's not even infrastructure. Like, what do we do? Like, we can't even go skating or like go to the mall or, oh wait, this is not 1980. Like we can't, there are things that we can't do there. There's like nothing there. Why would we go back? We've built a life here. Daniel's one of those people who's built a life here. And so much so that he's risen up in the ranks of government. And the cool thing about Babylon and then Persia is that they didn't just oppress those that they conquered. They had ways that they were involved in. Okay. We're going to get through this with this thing. So Daniel is moving up in the ranks, and there are people who don't like that for whatever reason. We don't get a full vision of what that is, but anytime that you're moving up, somebody's mad, right? Because they're not moving up. So they're mad, and they want to harm Daniel. They want to bring him down, and so they're looking for a reason. And so I don't know if you have those people who are always looking for a reason to take somebody down. That was these people. And they're looking, and they're like, well, what about his work? Does he do bad work? They're like, no, he doesn't do bad work. It's like, oh, is he like, doesn't deal like really good with people? And they're like, no, he's like so honest. And they're trying to find everything, and they cannot find anything to bring as a charge against Daniel. And so they say, this is what we're going to bring against Daniel. We will go after his faith. We will go after the law of his God. And it made me think of, if you were being accused, if somebody was trying to find anything bad about you, what could they bring against you? Could they say like, well, they're not really very good at going to class, or... Everybody bow your head and close your eyes. Or they say like, well, they show up most of the time for work, but maybe like not, they do it half-heartedly. Or maybe they, have these other charges against you. But the amazing thing is, what if you lived a life where the only thing that they could bring against you is they worship God. And they do it so faithfully, it annoys me. Right? That would be, man, what a life to live that somebody would look at our lives and say, they are so faithful, I hate it. Not, I don't know about that guy. I don't know if he's going to make it. He never shows up. Or have you ever talked to them? They're not even like honest. You can't even trust what they say. That was not who Daniel was. They couldn't go after his character. They couldn't go after his work. They could only go after his worship. And so I want to continue reading. They go to the king and say, you know what? This would honor you. We want to honor you. Why don't you make an edict that for this amount of time that everybody has to worship you? Right? You don't tell that to a king and he's like, oh, worship me? No, I don't really want people to worship me. No, they had egos. So let's pick up. We're going to pick up in verse 10. It says, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except to you, O king, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decrees you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to the king and said to him, remember, O king, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continuously, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of the nobles, so that Daniel's situation may not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. Okay, so maybe we would read this story and we would think, okay, what would I do in that situation? Would I go into my closet and hide and pray? Would I just pray to myself and they couldn't tell I was praying? Right? Maybe we'd think of all the ways in which we could get around the law that had been issued. As the decree went out, Daniel was not going to stop praying. He was not going to stop being faithful. He continued what he had always done. He didn't even shut the window. It says the window's wide open, facing Jerusalem. He's like, I'm praying. They may make this edict that I have to stop this, but I'm going to be faithful in this thing. It says that every 3 times a day he would get down on his knees and pray. Now, if you're in a Baptist tradition, a free church, a non-denominational, this is not something we often practice. But this is a way in which you can pray by kneeling. Maybe we can learn from our brothers and sisters who practice this. But he would kneel on the ground and pray. I don't know, this is a fun fact, but James, the brother of Jesus, he had a nickname. Anybody know what his nickname was? His nickname was Camel Knee. Camel knees, because he would kneel and pray so much that he developed calluses on his knees. So they knew that he was a man who would pray. And I think of this with Daniel, right? He was faithful 3 times a day. He would kneel down in his spot and pray. I've heard stories of pastors, great pastors, and when they've gone to their study after, when they weren't there, that if they looked behind their desk, there was a spot that was indented into the ground where they would kneel to pray every day. Man, what a life to be known for your praying. And that was Daniel. What he asked God for, what he was praying, we don't know all the specifics, but he was faithful in doing it. To think about, what would you be praying in that time? Maybe you would be praying that God would change the king's heart. God had changed the king's hearts over the years. Maybe God just changed his heart so that we would have the freedom to pray and to worship however we need to. Maybe you would pray, Lord, just help them not to find me. Make their attention elsewhere. Maybe we would pray, Lord, just intervene if they come after me and not to let it happen, not to let them find me. Right? He continued to earnestly seek the Lord and to pray. St. Augustine said, pray as though everything depended on God. Work as though everything depends on you. I think this was Daniel. Man, he prayed as if everything depended upon God, because it did. He knew that if this is the king's edict coming down, that he couldn't change it. Yes, he was rising up in position. He has some kind of relationship with the king, but in himself, he could not change it. But he was faithful. And he was faithful in what he was doing. He didn't change. It said, as he had always done. He didn't modify what he felt the Lord had called him to do. He remained faithful to it. Even when there was a risk, he remained faithful. He didn't complain. He didn't do it secretly. He stood firm in his commitment. Right? What does it look like to stand firm in your commitment? Even in the little things, right? Praying was not maybe what the world would see as this huge thing. It was this little thing that was happening, that was bigger than what the world saw. There are no guarantees, but he was faithful in the little things. He didn't know how it was going to play out. We get the end of the story. He didn't know when he was in his room praying how this was going to end. And to think about all the times where the Lord is asking us to be faithful in the little things. We don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't know if the outcome is favorable. We don't know how many times that this thing that we are doing might fail. I was just curious. So I looked up people who were famous who failed a lot. There's lots of lists. Apparently, don't become famous. People keep record of everything you've done wrong. But Abraham Lincoln, president, did great things. Did you know that when he was young, he entered the army? And he entered in as a captain and returned as a private. I don't know if you know anything about the army, but that's not good. Like, that is not success in the army. Right? He started numerous failed businesses. That's not good either. He went bankrupt twice, was defeated in 26 campaigns. 26 that he made for public office. Like, at some point, I guess he had nobody around him, or he didn't listen to them, that was like, I don't know, maybe politics, not your thing. 26 times he failed. He didn't win. But his presidency changed the course of a nation. Would you have hired a basketball player who said about his career, I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I have lost almost 300 games. On 26 occasions, I have been entrusted to take the game-winning shot, and I missed. I have failed over and over again in my life. Anybody want to guess who that is?
Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan. Y'all, he didn't even make his high school basketball team. Wow. Somebody's kicking themselves for that one. Yeah, so on paper, maybe he remembers everything that did not go well. But what did he do? It says that he succeeded. Why did he succeed? Because he showed up. He kept being faithful. Why did Abraham Lincoln succeed? He showed up. He kept being faithful. Right? There's something to faithfulness. There's no guarantees that you'll be a president or be a basketball player. But what could God do with your life if you're faithful in the little things? What does God want to do with your life, but needs you to grow by being faithful in the little things? His expectation, Daniel's expectation. Maybe he prayed expecting God to deliver him from this situation. But what do you think it was like for Daniel when they came for him to take him to the lion's den? God, I've been praying. Like 3 times a day I've been praying to you. We've been talking about this, Lord. We were not supposed to get to this point. You were supposed to veer them away to a different situation, a different thing. You're supposed to change the king's heart. Why are you taking me to the lion's den? Why am I going there? We don't know what he was thinking in this process. But they go and they get him. And they put him in the lion's den. And King Darius makes this statement. Oh, sorry, the wind blew my page. He says that I hope may your God whom you serve continually rescue you. Like the king was cheering for Daniel. He was cheering for him. But even the king didn't know what the God could really do. So let me pick up in verse 19. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near to the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servants of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lion? Daniel answered, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wounds were found on him because he had trusted in his God. Man, nobody could have imagined that. The people trapping him couldn't have imagined that. Maybe even Daniel couldn't even imagine that it would happen in that way. So they throw him in and they roll a stone in front. They put a signet ring on. Remind you of a different story? And the next day, the king comes and finds that he's been rescued. What if Daniel had not been faithful in praying, not been faithful in seeking God, not been faithful in all the little ways along the way? He would have missed it. He would have missed seeing God show show up. And as friends say, show up and show out. He showed up. He shut the mouths of lions. Who would have wanted to see that? I mean, I would have wanted to see it from a distance, let's be honest. Not like personally up close, but I would have loved to see that. Right? He says, did God save you, Daniel? He said, oh, God saved me. And it says he wasn't even hurt. He wasn't hurt. I wonder, for a generation who doesn't like anything difficult, what we might miss. What we might miss if we don't push into the inconveniences, the difficulties, the things, the moments that we're not sure if God's really there, where we give up too soon. What do we miss? What does God want to do with our lives if we are faithful? Faithful in the little things, faithful in prayer, faithful in communication with God, faithful in how we live out our lives before others. What if He wanted to shut some lions' mouths in our lives? Would we miss it? See, this didn't have just an implication on Daniel's life, which would have been nice. I mean, if it just ended like that, as like Daniel came out and it was great, but it impacted an entire kingdom. After this, King Darius sends out an edict to the whole kingdom and says, you should worship Daniel's God. Because Darius saw it. He just made an edict of worship me. And the king said, don't worship me. Worship that God. He keeps lions from eating people. By the way, right after this, the king's like, oh, y'all wanted him dead? So he threw all of them in there, and the lions ate. So it wasn't that they weren't hungry. It was that God did a work. But not only did it change a kingdom, do you know it's affecting kingdoms to this day? In Buddhism, there is, in the Buddhist, most of the temples, there is a future Buddha, statue of a future Buddha. Why is that future Buddha there? The first Buddha was alive during this time, probably in northern India, which would have been underneath under the Persian Empire. If the king would have sent out to his entire kingdom to worship this God of Daniel. Later, when we read in Daniel, he talks about this coming person. Right? It's, as we see it, it's the coming of Jesus. In the Chinese manuscripts that are often translated today, it says in 5,000 years, but the original manuscripts in Buddhism say in 500 years. This was about 500 years before Jesus came. So intertwined in this edict that King Darius sends out to his whole empire, at the same time is this religion that's beginning, and intertwined is this way to Jesus. Look to this Buddha. Look to this one who is going to tell the truth that we know as Jesus. So Daniel's little faithfulness in his apartment in Babylon, of praying, not even knowing the outcome, is a way in which God could use to not only bring a king to know who he is, a kingdom, and peoples of different faiths for generations. Just because he was faithful. I wonder what he wants to do with your life. I wonder what he wants to do with your little bit of faithfulness. So we often refer to this story as Daniel in the lion's den. I would like to propose we call it God in the lion's den. Daniel just happened to be there, but God was at work. So we're going to break into groups, and I forgot to write out the questions, but you got them? Okay, we can make them up. But want us to think about, what are the things that get in the way of our faithfulness? What are small inconveniences? What are things that make it hard to always be faithful? And then we'll put up the other one. She's typing that one. Let her get typing one at a time. So, okay, if you are a student leader, once you stand up, prayer time, we might need to break y'all into 2 groups. How many of y'all are there? Okay, if y'all will go to, student leaders, go to your areas. And then if you're new here, just pick one of these leaders that's standing and just go to their group. If you are a returner, go to whatever group you've always gone to.